The shadow over Rome. The wind moves strangely across the plains of southern Gaul, restless, unsettled, as if carrying the echo of something approaching. You can almost hear it, the low thunder of feet and hooves, the creaking of wagons, the murmur of thousands of voices speaking a language Rome has never understood. Imagine standing at the edge of the river Rhone, in the pale light before dawn, the mist sliding like ghosts over the water, and sensing that the horizon itself is changing. A storm is gathering, but not of weather, something older, wilder, and Rome, for all her legions and glory, does not yet grasp the scale of what is coming. This is the world of 105 BC, and the Roman Republic, vast, proud, seemingly eternal, is about to suffer a catastrophe so immense that ancient historians will compare it to Cannae, and some even to the destruction of entire nations. The defeat will be so total that its name will echo with dread for generations, the Battle of Arausio. But before the carnage, before the rivers run red, before the arrogant clash of wills between two Roman commanders unleashes disaster, the story begins with a shadow, an approaching tide of people whom the Romans simply could not categorize. They called them barbari barbarians, but that word, crude and dismissive, fails to capture what was truly happening. The Cimbri and Teutones were not raiders nor a typical migrating tribe. They were a nation on the move, tens of thousands of warriors, families, elders, children, carts, animals, and hopes carried on the wheels of colossal wagons. Their movement was not a march of conquest, but a desperate search for land pushed from their northern homelands by storms, rising seas, or some deeper mystery lost to time. Yet the Romans refused to see nuance. To them this migration was a threat, a humiliation, an insult to be crushed beneath the iron discipline of legionary formations. Rome believed she would stop them easily. Rome was wrong. The Cimbri first appeared on Rome's radar decades earlier when they crossed into southern Gaul and encountered Roman armies who underestimated their numbers and fury. At Neraea in 113 BC, the Romans suffered a shock. An entire army wiped out their general slain. But Rome shrugged it off as an anomaly, a mistake, something that could be corrected next time. Next time never came, because soon the Cimbri disappeared, moving west, roaming through Gaul, fighting Celts, forming alliances, losing battles, winning others, and dragging their vast community across Europe like a drifting, unpredictable storm. Roman politicians bickered and postured, pointing fingers, exploiting fear for votes, but no decisive action was taken. Then, as suddenly as they had vanished, the Cimbri returned, and this time they did not return alone. Beside them marched the Teutones, another migrating nation with warriors of legendary size and ferocity. Together, these two peoples represented something Rome had never faced before: a mobile, super-tribal confederation with tens of thousands of fighters and no fixed home to defend. To stop them, the Senate dispatched armies again and again, and again and again the Republic failed. By 105 BC, panic was beginning to seep into Roman political life. The people demanded action. They demanded strength. They demanded someone, anyone, to end the humiliation. Rome responded with not one general, but two. The first was Gaius Marius Maximus, a novus homo, a new man born outside the noble families that had dominated Roman politics for centuries. He was ambitious, capable, experienced, but the aristocracy despised him for his origins. Noble birth meant everything. Maximus had none. Yet he held imperium command of the main Roman army sent to stop the Cimbri. The second commander was Quintus Servilius Caepio, a man of ancient illustrious lineage. He was everything Maximus was not: aristocratic, proud, deeply political and utterly convinced of his superiority. Rome had sent him with a separate army not to fight the Cimbri directly, but to support, advise, and in truth, to overshadow Maximus. It was a disastrous decision. As the Cimbri and Teutones moved back toward Roman-held Gaul, preparing to cross rivers and roads that led southward into the heart of Roman influence, the two Roman commanders who needed unity, coordination, and trust fell instead into bitter rivalry. Maximus demanded that Caepio respect his lawful authority. Caepio sneered, proclaiming he would never serve under a man born in a hovel. Behind them the legions murmured. Soldiers could sense tension. Centurions exchanged uneasy glances. Even the allied Gallic scouts, familiar with the ways of war, warned that divided command was a curse. But the two generals refused to compromise. Far across the plains, the Cimbri campfires stretched for miles in the night, an ocean of flame flickering against the darkness. Their wagons formed a vast wheeled city. Warriors sharpened axes and spears beneath the cold stars. Women prepared food, children played among the tents, elders carved runes, and leaders debated Roman intentions. The Cimbri offered negotiations. They proposed land in exchange for peace. They even sought alliances. Rome spat the offers back at them, and so the shadow grew. The armies of the Republic marched north through dust and late summer heat, their armor clattering, their standards snapping in the wind. Imagine the sound, tens of thousands of iron-souled Caligi striking the earth in perfect rhythm. The Roman war machine, disciplined, relentless, advancing toward what they believed would be a decisive confrontation. They had no idea they were marching toward the worst military disaster Rome had seen in generations. The roads near Arausio, modern Orange in southern France, cut across rolling hills, vineyards, and deep river valleys. Here the Rhone flowed wide and swift. Here the Gaulish settlements watched Rome's uneasy build-up. And here on these plains the fates of nations would collide like thunder. As September turned to October, the air grew sharper, the nights colder, and the tension unbearable. Roman troops began constructing camps, one under Maximus, another under Caepio, deliberately placed apart to avoid cooperation. The Cimbri, watching from a distance, recognized the weakness instantly. A divided enemy is already half defeated. The stage was set. In the coming days, tens of thousands would die, rivers would choke with bodies, Roman discipline would crumble, and a single fatal decision, one rooted not in strategy but in pride, would unleash a catastrophe that would shake the Republic to its core, paving the way for the rise of Gaius Marius and the military reforms that would transform Rome forever. But for now, the wind continues its restless whisper over the valley of Arausio. A storm is coming, and Rome is not ready. The nation's on the move. The wind that sweeps across the Rhone Valley carries more than the chill of autumn. It carries the story of a people who have been moving for decades, driven by forces no Roman senator has ever seen, understood, or even bothered to imagine. To Rome they are simply host as enemies. To themselves they are a nation restless, nomadic, bound by blood and necessity. Imagine standing upon a ridge overlooking the Cimbri encampment days before Arausio. Below you stretches not an army but a continent on wheels. Wagons, thousands of them, circle outward in vast rings. Fires burn like scattered constellations across the plain. A steady hum of life drifts upward, oxen, lowing children, laughing warriors, sharpening blades, elders chanting old songs in a language that strikes Roman ears as raw thunder. This is not a tribe. This is a migration one of the greatest Europe had ever seen. Origins in the north. The Cimbri and the Teutones came from lands so distant the Romans barely knew they existed. Ancient writers, Strabo, Plutarch, Posidonius, struggled to describe them, claiming they hailed from the fog-shrouded coasts of the far north, perhaps Denmark, Jutland, or the misty lowlands by the North Sea. Rising waters, massive storms, or shifting climates may have forced them southward, though the truth is buried in prehistory. What matters is this: they did not come to conquer Rome. They came searching for a place to live, yet the further south they traveled, the more they collided with established peoples, Celts, Romans, and others who saw only invaders, not refugees. A moving civilization. To understand Arausio, you must understand the migrants themselves. Their wagons served as homes, temples, fortresses. Some were enormous towering constructions reinforced with carved beams and leather panels. Inside lived entire families, warriors, mothers, priests, elders. Women played crucial roles in leadership. Roman sources marvel at how the Cimbri women fought with fury, driving oxen, shouting curses, hurling spears from wagon tops when their people were threatened. It was a culture built for survival. Their warriors were tall. Many Romans wrote in awe and fear of their towering frames, pale hair, and piercing blue eyes. They fought not in the tight discipline of the legions, but with a shock power Rome rarely experienced: massive shield walls, thunderous charges, and a raw primal intensity that shattered weaker formations. But most dangerous of all was this: they were not tied to land. They could not be conquered by capturing a city, nor forced to negotiate by laying siege to a territory. Where the Romans anchored themselves to borders, the Cimbri moved like a living tide. The long road through Gaul. Decades before Arausio, the Cimbri had swept east toward Noricum, where they collided with a Roman army at Noraia. Rome expected victory. Instead, they received annihilation. The Cimbri crushed them in a storm of shields and axes, then vanished westward before Rome could retaliate. What followed was a wandering epic across Gaul battles against Celtic tribes, alliances with others, winters spent in high plains, summers along rivers where their wagons formed colossal encampments. Everywhere they went, stories followed stories of warriors who could lift Roman shields like toys, stories of women who rode into battle beside their husbands, stories of priests who read omens from the flight of birds or the patterns of storms. By the time they reappeared near Roman territory in 105 BC, their name inspired fear across 3 continents. Teutones, the Iron Wave. Beside the Cimbri marched the Teutones, a people more rigid, more martial, known for their iron discipline in battle. Roman sources describe them as the more aggressive of the 2 nations' men, who painted their bodies warriors who prized battle above all else. Together, Cimbri and Teutones formed a double-headed storm, each people balancing the other. The Cimbri were seekers, migrants, a nation looking for new land. The Teutones were fighters. Their combined strength created a force unlike anything Rome had ever faced. Scouts return with terrifying news. In the days before Arausio, Roman scouts crept toward the Cimbri camps. They returned, pale, shaken eyes wide with something bordering on fear. They did not describe an enemy encamped for war. They described a city, a sprawling, shifting metropolis of wagons, tents, and defensive walls built from timber and oxhide. Rivers of smoke rose into the sky. Warriors trained in fields beyond the outer rings. Herds of cattle grazed under watchful guards. Children played beneath the shadow of spears. To fight this was not to fight a typical barbarian raid. It was to fight an entire people, every man, woman, and elder, ready to defend the future of their wandering nation. Why negotiations failed. Before battle, the Cimbri and Teutones attempted a peaceful meeting. They offered land in exchange for alliance. They asked Rome for settlement rights, something Rome had occasionally granted to other peoples. But Rome's pride would not allow compromise. Caepio the aristocrat scoffed at the thought of treating with vagabonds. Maximus, though more reasonable, could not overcome the political pressure coming from Rome, where fear-mongers demanded absolute victory. Rome saw invaders. The migrants saw survival. Between these two viewpoints stretched a gulf too vast to bridge, the calm before the collision. As October 105 BC approached, the nations on the move slowed, then halted. Their wagons circled into fortified rings. Their warriors donned helmets decorated with beasts and wings. Priests read deep omens in smoke and water. They were ready. The only question was whether Rome was ready to face them. And far to the south, the divided Roman camps glowed dimly in the night. Two armies commanded by two rivals, neither willing to kneel, neither willing to yield authority. The Cimbri and Teutones watched and waited. A nation does not fear a divided enemy. The disaster was already approaching. The Roman commanders. Dawn breaks over the plains near Arausio, a thin blade of light cutting across the Roman camps. The air is cold, damp with river mist, and the first rays strike the polished bronze of legionary helmets, arranged in tight, orderly rows. It should be a scene of unity, discipline, and resolve. Instead, the silence carries a different weight, an invisible fracture that runs not through the ranks, but through the men who command them. Two Roman generals, two visions of authority, two egos too large to share a battlefield. And the fate of the Republic rests uneasily between them. The rise of a new man, Gaius Marius. Maximus wakes early, long before the horns signal the start of the day. He stands at the threshold of his command tent, gazing across the plain where the Rhone glimmers faintly under the morning sun. His face is lined with years of service, years spent earning what aristocratic birth had denied him. He is a novus homo, a new man, the first in his family to reach the Senate, to rise through the cursus honorum, to earn a consulship. His whole life is a climb. In Rome some envy this, many resent it. Maximus feels their judgment even now hundreds of miles from the Senate. Every general who lacked noble blood had been forced to fight harder, command harsher, prove more. And here, with one of Rome's greatest crises before him, he faces the challenge he has feared since youth, another commander who believes he deserves the power by birthright alone. Maximus turns toward the distant horizon. Smoke rises from the Cimbri encampments, thousands of fires burning in a city of wagons. He knows the danger. He knows the need for unity. But unity this year is a fantasy. The aristocrat arrives. Hours later, across the Roman lines, Quintus Servilius Caepio awakens in a different world, one of polished silver servants' perfumed wash basins, and a tent decorated like a miniature Roman villa. Caepio is a Servilius scion of an old patrician clan. To him, noble blood is destiny carved into the bones. It is not earned. It is inherited. It is unquestionable. And so is his disdain. He steps outside, adjusting the crimson folds of his cloak, and looks toward the other Roman camp, Maximus's camp. It is larger, positioned closer to the river with more legions. And worst of all, it belongs to a new man. Caepio's lip curls. In Rome, he had been furious at the Senate's decision to grant Maximus supreme command, that a man of his heritage should serve under a nobody impossible. And so he had done what aristocrats always did in the late Republic. he used politics as a weapon. He convinced the Senate to grant him a separate command, not subordinate, not cooperative, parallel, equal, and in Caepio's mind, superior. Now their two camps sit like rival fortresses on the same plain, divided by pride rather than distance. A clash of temperaments. Where Maximus inspires loyalty through steadiness, Caepio commands through fear and lineage. Where Maximus listens to scouts and officers, Caepio dismisses warnings as panic among inferiors. Where Maximus measures the Cimbri threat with careful calculation, Caepio waves it away as if brushing dust from a tunic. They are men molded by opposite worlds, one by merit, one by privilege, and each carries the instincts of their upbringing into every decision. And war, more than any other arena, punishes incompatible instincts. The soldiers whisper. Within the Roman ranks, rumors spread like wildfire. Soldiers from Maximus's army view Caepio's arrival with dread. Legionaries from Caepio's camp speak with haughty pride, mocking the peasant consul. Officers argue over protocols. Centurions murmur about divided command. Legionaries swap dark jokes by firelight. We need two generals united. Instead, we got two men who'd rather stab each other than the enemy. If the Cimbri don't kill us, this will. The men are afraid, and soldiers can smell a doomed command as easily as they smell rain. The first confrontation, midday. A heated meeting takes place between the two camps. Maximus, steady, composed, offers a formal greeting. Caepio does not acknowledge it. Instead, he points to the distant wagon city and sneers, "Those barbarians are unworthy of a Roman consul's concern." Maximus responds with the caution of an experienced general. Underestimation already cost Rome an army at Neraea. These people are not like the tribes we know, but Caepio cuts him off. "Do not lecture me on warfare, Malleus. Unlike you, I did not crawl from obscurity to reach this command." The officers gathered around fall silent. Maximus's jaw tightens. His restraint is admirable, but the insult is public, unforgivable, and strategically lethal. He says only, "Caepio, we must coordinate our camps. Our legions must support one another." Caepio's response is chilling. "My army will camp apart. My men will not fight under the orders of a low-born pretender." With those words, the disaster takes shape. The Cimbri watch, calmly far from the Roman bickering on the plains beyond the Cimbri, and Teutones observe. Their scouts report every Roman argument, every division, every sign of weakness. In their wagon councils, leaders shake their heads. This is not how a great power behaves. This is how a doomed power behaves. One Cimbri elder reportedly said, "They are many in number, but they march with two hearts that beat against each other." It is a perfect description. The Senate's letters arrive. Too late. Back in Rome, the Senate had begun to sense something was wrong. Their messengers travel north with scrolls urging cooperation, unity, coordination. They do not arrive in time, and even if they had, Caepio would likely have ignored them. Aristocratic arrogance was a law unto itself in the last century of the Republic. Orders were guidelines. Pride was mandatory. A dangerous standoff. As days pass, Maximus's scouts report ominous movements among the Cimbri. The wagon city is shifting, tightening, organizing for maneuver. The Teutones practice their characteristic massed charges. Yet Caepio continues to downplay the threat. He declares, "If Maximus cowers before barbarians, let him cower. I will bring Rome victory without him." He orders his cavalry to conduct provocative advances, reckless displays that the Cimbri interpret as signs of Roman disunity. Maximus, increasingly desperate, sends officers to negotiate cooperation. Caepio refuses to receive them. The two Roman armies stand within sight of one another, but the commanders are worlds apart. Imagine standing between them. Imagine being a centurion standing on a ridge between the two camps as the sun sets. To your left, Maximus's camp hums with tense, quiet discipline. To your right, Caepio's smaller camp bustles with aristocratic swagger and brittle confidence. Beyond both, the horizon glows with the countless fires of the Cimbri. 3 nations, 3 camps, 1 battlefield. You can feel it in the air that the smallest decision could ignite a catastrophe. And that decision is coming. 2 men, 1 disaster. Every great tragedy in Roman history has a moment when pride becomes deadlier than any enemy. At Arausio, that moment is fast approaching, and it will come not from the Cimbri, nor from the gods, nor from cursed omens. It will come from the hearts of Rome's own commanders. The men who should have stood together will instead tear the Republic apart through stubbornest rivalry and the desperate hunger for personal glory. And the Cimbri, watching from their wagon ramparts, will see their opportunity. The disaster is inevitable now. The only question is when it will break. The road to Gaul. The road north from Rome to Gaul is more than a line carved into the land. It is the spine of the Republic's ambition, the artery through which the lifeblood of the legions flows. Stones laid by enslaved hands decades earlier now echo with the clatter of armor, the creak of wagon wheels, and the rhythmic thunder of tens of thousands of caligae striking the earth in unison. The journey toward Arausio is long, arduous, and heavy with expectation. Imagine the sight: a Roman column stretching for miles, a serpent of iron, winding its way through valleys and over hills, the sun glinting off helmets in one endless, metallic ripple. Dust rises like smoke behind them as they push forward into the lands where Rome's fate will be tested. But beneath the disciplined march lies something else, whispers tension, fear. War is coming, and the men feel it in their bones. The land of southern Gaul. The landscape changes gradually as the armies push north. Italy fades behind them, replaced by the wild beauty of Transalpine Gaul. Vineyards cling to rolling slopes. Thick forests stretch across distant foothills. Rivers cut deep wounds into the land, fast-moving, cold, and unpredictable. Autumn paints the leaves gold and crimson as the wind sharpens with every passing day. To Roman eyes, Gaul is a frontier, unpredictable, dangerous, and dense with tribes whose alliances shift like river currents. But to Rome, this land is also opportunity, fertile fields, strategic roads, and access to the great trade routes of the north. This region, dotted with Celtic settlements, has already seen blood spilled. Roman armies marched through here not long ago, fighting the Saluvii and forcing their submission. The memories of Roman brutality linger whispered among village fires. The tribes watch from the shadows as the legions march, some with respect, others with resentment. Yet even the Gauls, battered by Rome, look nervously toward the northern horizon. The Cimbri and Teutones move with the weight of a tidal wave, and their arrival threatens more than Roman pride. It threatens the entire balance of the region, logistics of a war machine. The Roman army is a masterpiece of organization. Everything has its place, its time, its purpose. Quartermasters oversee supply wagons piled with grain tools, spare weapons, and the tent sections each soldier carries. The path to Arausio is paved not only with marching feet but with order and routine. Each day follows a rhythm older than any living legionary. Morning horns split the air, signaling the breaking of camp. Mess units prepare rations, usually barley or wheat porridge, sometimes enriched with meat if supplies allow. Pack animals are loaded their handlers, shouting commands. Standards rise snapping in the wind. The column forms centuria by centuria, century by century. The march begins steady, disciplined, precise. The legions move like a single organism fortified by training and tradition, but even this machine strains under the weight of political division. At the head of the main column rides Maximus, commanding the larger share of the army. Days behind him, Caepio pushes his own legionaries north, with equal urgency, not to support Maximus, but to outshine him. It is not cooperation, it is a race. Civilian shadows. The roads are not empty. Merchants trail in the army's wake, selling bread, wine, and trinkets. Camp followers, laborers, smiths, cooks, families move with a vast procession, creating a moving city behind the disciplined lines. Local Gallic tribes keep their distance but send emissaries to watch, negotiate, or simply observe what Rome intends. Some seek Roman protection against the Cimbri. Others simply want to survive the coming storm. And among them travel rumors of tall giants with pale hair, rumors of wagons the size of houses, rumors of women who fight with spears, rumors of Roman armies torn apart in minutes. Every new whisper adds to the dread settling over the march, a sense of inevitability. As the legions cross the Rhone for the first time, the river runs high and swift with early autumn meltwater. Engineers construct pontoon bridges, their work efficient, but dangerous logs crash together under the pressure of the current. Ropes bite into calloused hands. The soldiers can feel it now. The enemy is close. Night brings uneasy sleep. The wind blows cold across the camps, carrying distant echoes that might be wolves or something else. Fires burn low. Armor gleams in the dying light. Veterans sharpen blades, muttering about the strange defeats Rome has suffered in recent years. The Cimbri problem is no longer just a story. It is becoming a presence. The march tightens. By late September, Maximus's scouts report clear signs: trampled grasslands, abandoned fires, traces of wagon wheels, discarded tools. The Great Migration has passed through this region. Their trail is enormous, unmistakable. The legions move faster. Rations are tightened. Longer marches, shorter breaks, more patrols. Every column advances more urgent than the last. In the distance, Celtic guides point toward the plains of Arausio and speak of fires beyond counting. The Cimbri and Teutones have chosen ground near the river, a wide plain bordered by water and rising terrain, perfect for maneuver, but deadly for an army that fights divided. A shiver runs through the Roman officers. This battlefield favors unity. They possess none. Caepio's arrival. Days later, Caepio and his legions finally join the general region, but not the main army. Instead of merging with Maximus, Caepio deliberately sets his camp far upstream, his banners flying proudly, as if to declare independence. The Gauls who witness this shake their heads. Even they understand the significance. Two Roman armies facing the greatest threat in a generation choose separation over survival. Local chieftains whisper among themselves, Rome marches with two minds. It will break. And the Cimbri scouts hear these whispers. Tension between the camps. The road that once carried both armies north now becomes the line dividing them. Legionaries from Maximus's camp occasionally cross paths with Caepio's men on foraging missions. Their interactions involve pointed glances, muttered insults, and occasional shoving matches. Discipline holds, barely. But morale does not. Maximus urges calm. He forbids his soldiers from escalating conflict. Caepio encourages the opposite, telling his men they serve the true Roman commander. The road between camps becomes a silent battlefield of pride. The terrain takes shape. As the Roman armies settle into the region, the terrain near Arausio reveals itself in chilling clarity. To the east, the Rhone reaches swift and deep, cutting off retreat. To the west, rolling hills limit maneuverability. The central plain is wide and open, a perfect space for Cimbri charges. To the north, the wagon city spreads across the horizon, a shadow made of wood and fire. Maximus studies the terrain with a strategist's eye. He sees both possibilities and dangers. He knows the river behind them could become a trap if their lines break. But Caepio sees only opportunity glory waiting to be seized. The last stretch. On the final approach, the legions pass through a narrow valley that empties into the battlefield. The sound of distant horns echoes across the plain. The Cimbri are preparing. The Roman soldiers feel the shift immediately. The land no longer seems indifferent. It feels alive, watching, waiting. Each step north carries them deeper into the jaws of fate. And though they cannot yet see the enemy, the presence of the migrant nations presses on them like a weight. Many soldiers grip their shields a little tighter. Others murmur prayers to Mars, Jupiter, or their household gods. Veterans spit in the dust. All know the truth. The long road has led them to a place from which not all will return. The camps at Arausio. The plains around Arausio stretch wide beneath an autumn sky, a vast expanse of gold and brown, where the Rhone River glitters like a coiled serpent in the morning light. It is here on this open ground, with the river at their backs and the hills to their west, that the Roman armies make camp. It should be a moment of unity, of fortified purpose, of calm before the storm. Instead, it is a landscape divided. 2 Roman camps, 2 commanders, 2 armies that refuse to become one, and looming just beyond the horizon, the flickering lights of a nation on the move. Maximus establishes the main camp. Gaius Marius, Maximus, holding rightful supreme command, chooses the southern field near a bend in the Rhone. The terrain is defensible. The river protects his flank. The open ground allows for clear maneuvering. His engineers drive stakes into the soil, marking out defensive perimeters. Legionaries erect ramparts of earth and timber in practiced formation, creating a fortress almost overnight. The camp is enormous, tens of thousands of men. Standards rise above the walls. Fire pits are dug in neat rows. The hum of Roman order fills the air. Maximus walks the lines, speaking to officers, inspecting defenses, ensuring discipline. He knows the Cimbri are near. He knows a single mistake could doom them all. His camp is built as if the battle could start tomorrow, because in truth, it could. Caepio's stubborn defiance north of Maximus, separated by a stretch of open ground that should never have existed. Quintus Servilius Caepio establishes his own camp. His forces are smaller, his position weaker, but his pride is stronger than his sense. Caepio refuses to build alongside Maximus's fortifications. He refuses to share scouts. He refuses to coordinate watches. He refuses to accept orders from someone he views as beneath him. His camp mirrors his arrogance. The ramparts are built too quickly, too thin, as if Caepio believes Rome's walls of nobility alone will protect his men. Officers echo their commander's contempt, laughing at Maximus's precautions as unnecessary caution. The soldiers do not laugh. They sense what their general ignores. The Cimbri are near, and they are not a foe to underestimate. Scouts return with ominous reports. At dusk, 3 Roman scouts return to Maximus's camp. Their faces are pale, their voices hollow. They describe a sight so vast it seems impossible. Fires general, too many to count. A city of flames stretching across the plains. They speak of towering wagons arranged in concentric rings of warriors, training in massive formations of women who fight from the wagon's tops with javelins of shields painted in animal patterns of cavalry unlike anything Rome has faced. Maximus listens in silence. He asks questions. He measures their words. He does not flinch. He knows what this means. The Cimbri are ready. But when he sends word to Caepio, pleading for a joint council, Caepio sends the messenger back with a sneer. "Tell Maximus, I do not take orders from a peasant." The scout kneels before Maximus, trembling, as he delivers the insult. The general closes his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. He knows Caepio's stubbornness is no longer just a political nuisance. It is a threat to Rome itself. A tense nightfall. As twilight drapes the plain, both camps come alive with anxious energy. Fires spark to life. Armor is polished, weapons checked. Centurions bark orders as men stack their shields in neat rows outside their tents. In Maximus's camp, the mood is cautious but controlled. Discipline holds like iron. Veterans tell the younger men stories of past battles, imparting whatever confidence they can. The watch is doubled. Patrols sent farther than usual. Meanwhile, in Caepio's camp, the atmosphere is brittle. Soldiers whisper openly of their commander's arrogance. Some speak of defecting to Maximus's camp. Others consider sneaking south to warn Maximus personally of Caepio's reckless maneuvers. Yet fear stops them. Desertion means death, and Roman discipline is merciless. Instead, they sharpen their blades and pray. The Cimbri encampment, a living storm. Out across the plain, the Cimbri wagon city glows like a constellation fallen to earth. Thousands of fires illuminate miles of tents and wagons. Warriors with long hair and giant shields move between the rings. Children run through the shadows. The clang of metal echoes as blacksmiths work deep into the night. It is not chaos. It is not disorganized. It is a mobile city preparing for war. Their leaders gather at the central wagon's tall, fur-clad chiefs with iron helmets shaped like beasts. They speak of Roman divisions with quiet satisfaction. Their scouts have reported every insult, every argument, every split. The Cimbri do not rush. They do not taunt. They wait. Sun Tzu would write centuries later, "When your enemies are at odds, stand still and watch." The Cimbri already understood this. Foreshadowing of disaster. As midnight approaches, something eerie happens. A horn sounds from the Cimbri camp, deep and resonant, like a distant bellow of thunder. It rolls across the plains, reaching both Roman camps. Maximus's soldiers glance at one another, unsettled but calm. Caepio's men jolt awake, some rushing out of their tents in confusion. Then another horn, and another. Slow, measured, inevitable, not an attack, a reminder. The Cimbri know where Rome is. They know Rome is divided, and they want Rome to feel it. Back in Maximus's command tent, the general studies a map illuminated by lantern light. His officers stand silent, watching him. At last he speaks. "We cannot face them divided. Caepio must unite with us." An officer whispers, "He will not, General." Maximus nods slowly. Then Rome is in peril. The camps collide. In silence. Though physically separated, the two camps are psychologically bound. Every torch lit by one army casts its light onto the doubts of the other. Maximus's men admire their general but fear Caepio's recklessness. Caepio's men trust their general's lineage, but fear his arrogance. Both camps feel the weight of the Cimbri's presence pressing on their chests. A legionary in Maximus's camp murmurs to his tentmate, "It feels like the gods are watching." His companion shakes his head. No, the gods have already turned away. Morning approaches. By the time the first light appears on the horizon, neither Roman camp has slept well. Maximus rises before dawn, calm but burdened. He prepares for another attempt at negotiation, knowing time is slipping away. Caepio awakens with fury, convinced Maximus plans to steal his glory, determined to prove his superiority. And the Cimbri, they rise with purpose. Their warriors form ranks. Their horses are saddled. Their weapons gleam in the new sun. It is clear now they are moving toward something. The camps at Arausio, 2 Roman islands of iron, stand on the brink of a tide they cannot imagine. The tragedy is not that Rome is outmatched. The tragedy is that Rome stands divided at the moment when unity is life itself. The fatal moment is coming, and the camps at Arausio stand waiting, unaware that their separation is already Rome's doom. The Cimbri Council of War. Night falls across the plains of Arausio, and the Cimbri wagon city glows like an ember in the darkness. Thousands of fires flicker beneath the cold sky, their smoke drifting upward in twisting pillars that mingle with the stars. To the Romans, these flames are an omen. To the Cimbri and Teutones, they are simply the steady heartbeat of a nation preparing for war. Here at the heart of that living city beneath hides and timber, reinforced by generations of craftsmanship, the leaders gather. Not in marble halls, not in Senate chambers, but in a great ring of wagons adorned with carved symbols, animal totems, and painted shields. This is the council of war where decisions are made not by aristocratic privilege, but by consensus honor and the deep ancient voice of the tribe. Tonight, that voice speaks of Rome. Inside the wagon city, imagine walking through the Cimbri encampment as an outsider if one dared. The sounds are overwhelming. The clang of blacksmiths shaping blades, the thud of axes splitting wood, the low chants of priests invoking their gods. Warriors move between fires, enormous shields slung over their backs, axes glinting in the orange glow. Women prepare food, mend clothing, and tend to children, but there is no softness here. Cimbri women fight when needed. Roman sources speak in hushed astonishment of their ferocity. The wagon rings tighten toward the center, each circle a defensive wall, each wagon lashed to the next. Countless oxen graze at the perimeter, guarded by younger warriors. And at the center, where the fires burn brightest, the letters assemble beneath the open sky. This is where the fate of Rome will soon be decided. The leaders of the Cimbri and Teutones, standing tallest among them, is Boiorix, chief of the Cimbri, a warrior of monumental stature, golden hair braided and tied behind him, scars crossing his arms and chest like runes of past battles. He is not a king in the Roman sense. He is a chosen leader, a war chief whose authority rises from respect, not law. Beside him stands Lugius, another Cimbri chieftain, older, stern, his eyes sharp as the frost that forms on the wagon wheels each morning. Lugius is a voice of caution, advocating strategy over impulse. Further on, wrapped in thick wolf pelts, stands Caepio, whose name Roman historians will later record with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Caepio is quiet, contemplative, a man who speaks only when needed, and near them, representing the Teutones, stands Teutobod, broad-shouldered, towering his presence like a boulder planted in the earth. While the Cimbri tend toward diplomacy when possible, the Teutones lean toward battle. Teutobods' deep voice rumbles across the firelight like distant thunder. Together these leaders form the council that will decide whether to negotiate, remain patient, or end Rome's defiance. The omens of the sky. Before the council begins, the priests come forward, men and women, bearing torches, bone talismans, and carved wooden idols, representing gods whose names the Romans never learned. The priests throw herbs and grain onto the fire, watching the smoke rise in whirling patterns. They chant in old haunting tongue, sparks crackle upward, the flames shift. A priestess raises her eyes. The gods speak of division among our enemies. Murmurs ripple across the council. 2 fires burn apart another priest intones. 2 leaders walk different paths. Boiorix nods slowly. They have seen the Roman camps with their own eyes, 2 separate fortresses instead of a unified line. This is not merely a report, it is confirmation, a sign. Teutobod's jaw tightens in satisfaction. Then let them stay divided, he growls, and let us meet them not as supplicants, but as warriors. But the council is not ready to decide. The first debate, peace or war. Boiorix gestures to the flames. We came seeking land, he says, voice low but powerful, not death. We offered peace to the Romans. Lugius replies sharply, and they spat on our offer. The chiefs murmur in agreement. The insult of Roman arrogance still burns. Maximus, though more reasonable, had lacked authority. Caepio had rejected diplomacy entirely. Why ask for land from those who cannot rule their own army? Caesarix adds quietly. Boiorix raises a hand for silence. They are many, he says. More than at Noria, more than at Burdigala. Lugius counters, but they are divided, and weakness is like blood in the water. Teutobod's deep voice booms again. Let them come. My warriors are restless. They hunger for the clash. The council breaks into a storm of overlapping voices, some shouting for war, others urging caution. A nation cannot risk itself lightly. The Cimbri and Teutones are strong, but they carry their families, elders, and children with them. Their fate is bound to every decision. It is Boiorix who finally restores order. Second debate, the Roman weakness. A young scout is brought before the council. Dust covers his cloak, his hair tangled from long hours riding. He kneels, then rises, speaking without hesitation. I have seen the Roman camps, he says. They are not 1, they are 2. Boiorix's eyes narrow. Separate. How far apart? The scout raises a hand, spacing his fingers, far enough that one cannot help the other before the battle is lost. A quiet falls over the council. Caesarix's voice cuts through it. Their pride is our victory. Another scout steps forward. Their commander in the North Caepio strikes out with small cavalry raids. Reckless, he seeks glory, not safety. Teutobod laughs the sound like a boulder tumbling down a mountain. He will have glory, he says, in death. The council leans forward. Every leader feels it now, the shift, the opportunity. Rome's command structure is broken. Rome's scouts are divided. Rome's discipline is cracked. This is the moment they have waited for. The third debate. Timing not yet. Lugius warns, they are many. Their walls are strong. Let them attack first. Let their arrogance blind them. But the priests step forward again. One speaks. The gods favor the bold. Another strike when the enemy does not expect it. Teutobod nods eagerly. Boiorix considers. His gaze travels the circle of faces from cautious to bloodthirsty, from weary to determined. Finally he speaks. The Romans are divided. Their leaders are at war with each other. Their river traps them. Their pride blinds them. He lifts his spear, its iron tip reflecting the firelight. We will prepare, but we will not rush. When Rome breaks its own lines, the spear lowers. we will strike. The council erupts not with war cries, but with the steady approval of a decision made with both wisdom and ferocity. They will wait for Rome to make the first mistake, and Rome will make that mistake. Dawn over the wagon city. By the time the council disperses, the sky is paling. Warriors rise with the sun, children peek from the wagons, horses shake frost from their manes, women tie their hair-tightened straps, lift spears. A nation awakens. The Cimbri and Teutones know war is coming. They know Rome is fractured. They know the ground at Arausio will soon run red. And in their calm, confident preparation lies the greatest danger of all. The Romans fear them. The Cimbri do not fear the Romans. They wait like a storm at the edge of the horizon, silent, gathering strength, watching the two rival Roman generals tear their own fate apart. Arausio is not yet a battlefield, but after this council, its destiny is sealed. Sparks in the dust. The sun lifts slowly over the plains of Arausio, turning the river into a shimmering blade and painting the fields in shades of gold and ash. A stillness hangs in the air, a deceptive calm, the kind that exists only when two storms hover on the brink of collision. The Romans feel it. The Cimbri and Teutones feel it. Even the animals sense the rising tension. But before the two great forces crash together, the land will witness a series of sparks, small actions, small clashes, small decisions that will turn the coming disaster from a possibility into an inevitability. The dust is about to rise, and every grain of it carries Rome's doom. Caepio's growing fury. In the northern Roman camp, Quintus Servilius Caepio wakes in a foul mood. The previous night brought no peace. Scouts have returned with warnings. Officers have urged caution. And yet all he sees across the open fields to the south is Maximus's massive camp, its standards fluttering arrogantly in the morning breeze. Caepio interprets everything through the lens of pride. Maximus's caution is cowardice. Maximus's discipline is pretense. Maximus's authority is an insult. And the proximity of Maximus's camp feels like a shadow over Caepio's honor. He stands at the edge of his ramparts, staring toward the distant Cimbri wagon city, where thousands of fires still smolder from the night. Instead of fear, he feels anger. He should be the one negotiating with the Senate. He should command the main army. He should earn the glory of crushing these northern migrants. And so the dangerous thought takes root. If Maximus will not give him command, he will take it through victory. The first probing skirmishes. While the Roman commanders brood, the front lines shift. Caepio orders small units of cavalry to ride forward to probe the enemy he claims, to test their defenses, to intimidate them. But every officer knows the truth. Caepio wants a small triumph, something he can show Rome proudly, something that proves he does not need Maximus. His cavalry thunders across the plains, dust trailing behind them like a comet's tail. They approach the Cimbri's outer perimeter, where scouts and warriors watch silently from horseback or wagon top. The Teutones see the Roman riders first. They do not attack. They do not flinch. They simply watch. The Roman cavalry circles, shouts insults, brandishes weapons. One rider looses an arrow into the ground near a Cimbri warrior, a show of defiance. The warrior does not move. He lifts his spear slowly, plants its butt in the earth, and smiles. It is not a friendly smile. It is a smile that says, "You are beneath our notice." The cavalry returns to Caepio's camp without bloodshed, but with humiliation simmering in their pride. Caepio interprets their silence as weakness. Maximus interprets it as patience. Only one of them is correct. Maximus's uneasy restraint. In the southern camp, Maximus receives reports of Caepio's actions. He does not rage, though he has every reason to. Instead, he calls a meeting with his officers. His tone is calm, but laced with urgency. He is provoking them, Maximus says. We cannot allow this. One officer, eyes dark with frustration, speaks. General Caepio seeks glory. He does not fear that he may ignite the battle. Maximus closes his eyes, steadying himself. It is not glory he will ignite, he murmurs. It is catastrophe. He sends a messenger again to urge Caepio to stop the raids. Caepio sends the messenger back with a single sentence. Tell Maximus that a true Roman does not fear barbarians. The words sting more than any insult should. Maximus knows the stakes. He knows that unity is the only path to survival. But how do you unite with a man who sees cooperation as humiliation? The Cimbri response. At the Cimbri wagon city, the leaders gather briefly after the Roman cavalry's provocation. Teutones, towering and eager for blood, urges immediate retaliation. These Romans test our patience like gnats, he growls. Let us swat them. Lugius, older and more deliberate, shakes his head. Not yet. Let them break themselves first. Boiorix watches the Roman camps from a hilltop. His eyes narrow with understanding. They quarrel among themselves, he says. That is victory enough for now. The Cimbri do not move their main forces. But they do make one quiet, devastating choice. They begin preparing an ambush, not for the entire Roman army, not yet, but for any Roman foolish enough to step too close. The ambush on the riverbank. The next day, Caepio, unwilling to be outdone by his own cavalry, orders another probe. This time, a larger one. 50 riders move north following the riverbank, their horses' hooves kicking up cold spray as they gallop. They do not see the Cimbri warriors hidden among the tall reeds. Suddenly, javelins whistle through the air, dozens at once. Horses scream, men fall into the mud. Bronze armor splashes into the shallows as the survivors try to flee. The Cimbri charge with terrifying precision, no chaos, no frenzy, just swift, overwhelming force. Only a handful of Romans make it back alive. When Caepio hears the report, he does not think I caused this, he thinks good. Now my men have tasted their blood. But it is not Cimbri blood spilled on the riverbank, it is Roman. Whispers of doom in the camps. The night after the ambush, both Roman camps feel the weight of dread. In Maximus's camp, soldiers sit quietly by their fires. They speak of omens of the cold wind, of the strange cries echoing from the Cimbri camp. Veterans murmur that this feels too much like Noriah, not a battle, but a disaster waiting to unfold. In Caepio's camp, panic mixes with bravado. Some soldiers speak boldly of revenge, others sharpen their swords with trembling hands. And all know this truth: the enemy is close, too close, closer than Rome is ready for. A meeting that ends in ruin. Maximus, driven by desperation, attempts one final diplomatic move. He sends his most trusted officers to beg Caepio for cooperation. Caepio receives them only because refusing would look weak. The meeting is brief, heated, catastrophic. Maximus's officers speak plainly. General Caepio, the enemy is preparing. We must unite. We cannot fight alone. Caepio's reply is venom. I will not serve under a mongrel consul. If you fear the enemy, hide behind your ramparts. I will win glory without you. The officers return to Maximus defeated. Their report is devastating. He will not join us, General. He would rather die and take us with him than submit. Maximus says nothing. He simply goes to his map table and stares at the terrain at the river, at the enemy position. He knows what is coming. He knows he cannot stop it alone. The last spark. At dawn, Caepio makes his move. He sends his army forward. not in full battle formation, not coordinated, not supported. He marches them out in a reckless, glory-seeking thrust toward the Cimbri. Maximus watches from the southern camp, horror in his eyes. He is going to destroy us all, he whispers. But it is too late. The sparks in the dust have become flames, and the battle of Arausio is about to explode. Dawn of battle. The morning of October 6, 105, BC arrives with a cold, piercing clarity. A pale sun hangs low over the plains near Arausio, casting long shadows across the earth. The grass glitters with frost. The Rhone murmurs softly behind the Roman lines, and somewhere beyond the river mist, an entire nation of warriors stirs. This is the dawn Rome will never forget. No horn sound from the Cimbri, no drums, no chaotic shouting. Instead, the silence itself is oppressive, like the air before lightning strikes. The Romans rise into that silence, stretching stiff limbs, adjusting armor straps, lifting shields still cold from the night. Some pray, some joke nervously, some stare northward toward the horizon, where their doom waits in stillness. The storm has not broken yet, but the world can feel it coming. Maximus's camp, discipline and fear. Gaius Marius. Maximus wakes early, as always. His armor is polished, his face is steady. But behind his eyes lies exhaustion, the exhaustion of a leader trying to hold an army together while another Roman commander tears it apart. He climbs a small rise overlooking the plain. The sun is rising from behind the hills, illuminating the Cimbri wagon city in the distance. Even at this hour, the encampment shows signs of motion wagons being drawn into new formations. Warriors gathering their gear priests, chanting around central fires. It is not chaos, it is preparation. Maximus's officers gather around him, stoic, disciplined, but pale with dread. They're moving. One officer whispers. Maximus nods. They sense Caepio's intentions. So do I. He looks north, Caepio's Camp Pride, before the fall. Quintus Servilius Caepio is already awake, his cloak wrapped around his shoulders, a defiant smile tightening the edges of his mouth. Today he believes Rome will remember his name. He strides between his smaller legions, barking orders. Formations assemble with rapid precision shield walls, tightening cavalry units, adjusting saddles, standard bearers lifting their eagles high. His army is disciplined, capable, brave, but it is also vastly outnumbered by the Cimbri, and it is alone. Caepio's senior centurions glance nervously toward the Cimbri camps. They have seen the enemy move like a tide, not a rabble. They have seen the sheer number of wagons, the endless files of warriors, the disciplined ranks of Teutonic cavalry. But they have also seen their general's face, and they know no argument will sway him. One finally speaks, "General, we should wait. Join with Maximus. Fight as one." Caepio's eyes flash with contempt. I will not share glory with that man. Today we show Rome who her true commander is. The centurion bows his head, and the disaster marches one step closer. The battlefield revealed. As the sun climbs higher, the entire landscape reveals its deadly geometry. To the east, the Rhone forms a glittering barrier, beautiful but merciless. If the Roman lines collapse, it will swallow fleeing men like a maw. To the west, low rolling hills restrict maneuverability. In the center, the wide open plain stretches like a stage awaiting tragedy, perfect for massed charges. To the north, the Cimbri wagon city shifts into battle formation, its rings breaking apart and reassembling into columns, squares, and cavalry units. Everything about the terrain demands unity. Everything about the Roman command structure defies it. The Cimbri begin their own dawn ritual. Across the field, thousands of Cimbri warriors emerge, not in wild chaos, but in disciplined, purposeful ranks. Plutarch will later describe the sound, a low rumble like distant thunder. Huge oval shields painted with spirals and beasts catch the sunlight. Spears rise into the sky like a forest suddenly sprouting from the earth. Cavalry horses snort clouds of steam into the air as riders tighten their grips. Women stand on the wagon's ramps, shouting encouragement, lifting spears, banging weapons against the wooden frames. The Cimbri war priests move among the warriors, chanting deeply, casting herbs into the fires, drawing tribal marks on faces and shields. A priestess lifts a flaming torch and casts it into a pit of incense, the smoke rising in a swirling column. It is a ceremony of preparation, a ceremony of inevitability. Boiorix, their great leader, stands at the front. His height towers over his warriors. His armor gleams. His voice carries across the ranks. Today we fight not to conquer, but to survive. A roar answers him, thousands of voices, deep and resonant, echoing off the hills. Rome hears the roar. Rome feels it. Maximus prepares for battle. Reluctantly, Maximus sees the enemy forming. He knows the Cimbri will not strike first, not unless provoked. And he knows Caepio, somewhere to his north, is preparing to provoke them in the worst possible way. He orders his own troops into defensive positions, shields raised, spears planted, artillery wheels locked, archers positioned behind the infantry lines, cavalry held in reserve along the flanks. His voice is steady as he speaks to his officers. Hold. Whatever Caepio does, we must be ready to protect the Republic, but even he can sense the unease. His own soldiers look toward Caepio's camp, then toward the Cimbri, then back. They know something is wrong. They know something is coming. Caepio advances. At last the moment arrives. Caepio gives the order. His legionaries march out of their camp, standards, high boots pounding the earth shields, gleaming like rows of burnished gold. The Cimbri watch with calm curiosity. They do not move. They do not shout. They simply observe. Because they understand what Caepio does not, the Romans are splitting themselves into pieces. Maximus sees Caepio moving ahead without support and feels dread wash over him like cold water. An officer beside him mutters, "If he advances further..." Maximus finishes the thought. He will trigger the battle alone. The first clash approaches. Dust rises behind Caepio's advancing lines. His cavalry units break off at his command, spreading to the flanks, eager for the first strike. The infantry marches steadily, their discipline flawless, but the formation is stretched, overextended, exposed. The Cimbri respond, not with a full charge, not with a reckless assault, but with subtle, coordinated movement. Cavalry reposition on the left flank. Shield walls tighten on the right. Light infantry fan out in front. Wagons shift to protect the rear. It is a tactical reshaping, silent, efficient, terrifying. These are not barbarians. These are seasoned warriors who have crossed half a continent fighting for survival, and they are about to meet Caepio's lone advance head-on. Imagine standing there. Imagine being a young Roman legionary under Caepio's command. Your shield is heavy. Your spear shakes slightly in your grip. Sweat drips despite the cold morning air. You glance south toward Maximus's camp, hoping, praying for support. But Maximus is too far away, and Caepio has not asked for help. Ahead, the Cimbri shield wall seems endless, towering men with painted faces, their long hair whipping in the wind, their armor glinting like a sea of forged iron. Suddenly, a Cimbri war horn sounds deep, primal, resonant. It is not a battle horn, it is a warning. And then Boiorix raises his spear, and the world holds its breath. The dawn of battle has arrived, and Rome is terribly, hopelessly unprepared. The storm breaks. The plains of Arausio hold their breath. Caepio's advance halts for a moment, just a heartbeat. His legionaries shifting their weight, lifting shields, tightening grips on spear shafts. The cold morning light gleams on polished bronze and iron. The air is sharp metallic, infused with the scent of river mist and trampled earth. Across the field the Cimbri stand silent, rows upon rows of towering warriors, their shields painted with spirals and beasts, their spears rising like a forest of steel. Behind them the wagon city stirs women shouting encouragement from atop the wooden ramparts, children watching with wide eyes, priests lifting hands to the sky as if invoking ancient forces from the cold northern wind. And then the storm breaks. The first roar. It begins with a sound no Roman has ever heard before. A low rumble rising from thousands of throats, deepening into a roar that rolls across the field like thunder bursting from the mountains. Shields shake. Horses rear. Even veteran legionaries flinch. Then the Cimbri start to move, not chaotically, not in wild frenzy, but with terrifying, disciplined momentum. Shield walls lock, spear arms extend, cavalry units surge around the flanks in a sweeping crescent of snorting horses and flashing blades. The earth trembles beneath the weight of tens of thousands of warriors charging forward in unified fury. This is not a tribal skirmish. This is not a raid. This is a tidal wave of humanity in motion, and it is crashing toward Caepio. The clash of iron and flesh. The impact is cataclysmic. Cimbri spears strike the Roman front line with explosive force, piercing shields staggering men backward. Shields slam against bodies. Wood cracks. Bronze dents. Men scream. Horses scream. The ground becomes a flurry of dust and blood. The Roman centurions bellow commands, hold the line, shield wall. Stand firm, but the Cimbri charge is unlike anything they have faced. Their shields are massive, their swings wide and devastating. Huge framed warriors batter the Roman line with the weight of men who have survived endless battles across half a continent. A Cimbri warrior smashes into the Roman line, splintering a legionary shield, sending him sprawling. Another drives a spear through the throat of a centurion whose crimson crest topples into the dust. And still the Romans fight. Their discipline is unmatched, their formations immediate and reflexive, but discipline cannot hold forever against sheer mass. Caepio's overextension. Caepio watches from behind, eager, hungry, convinced victory is within reach. But he does not see what trained eyes would see. His lines are thinning, his flanks exposed, the center beginning to bow under pressure. He mistakes the initial Roman resistance as a sign of impending triumph. But Maximus, far to the south, sees the smoke rising, sees the dust clouds forming, sees the unmistakable chaos of a line beginning to break. His officers turn to him horrified. He's engaged the entire enemy host, alone. Maximus's voice is grave. The storm has broken, and Caepio stands in its path, alone. The Cimbri push forward. As the Roman line buckles, the Cimbri counterattack intensifies. Their warriors rotate in and out in disciplined cycles, something the Romans did not expect. A front rank charges spears, thrusting axes, swinging. Then they withdraw for the second rank to crash forward with fresh strength. It is a living machine of war. The Teutones cavalry sweeps along Caepio's right flank, kicking up dust as they strike the Roman horsemen. The impact shatters the Roman cavalry formation, scattering riders like leaves in a gale. Spears pierce horses' sides, riders topple headfirst into the dust. On the left flank, Cimbri light infantry harass the Roman lines with javelins, dozens, hundreds of them, arcing through the air in deadly spirals. Each volley weakens the line. Each step forward pushes the Romans closer to collapse. Fear spreads through Caepio's ranks. The Roman legionaries sense it, the shift, the imbalance, the approaching catastrophe. Their shield walls begin to bend under pressure. Men stumble backward. Officers shout desperately to restore formation. The roar of battle becomes deafening metal, clashing men, screaming the bellow of Cimbri war horns, drowning out even the commands of the centurions. A legionary feels the earth vibrating beneath him as the Cimbri press harder. Sweat trickles down his face. His shield shakes with each impact. He can barely see for the dust. He shouts, "Where is Maximus?" The answer is a silence filled only by the sound of death. The Teutones drive the flank. A wave of Teutonic cavalry, hulking riders on heavy horses, sweeps through the Roman flank like a scythe cutting through wheat. They smash into the auxiliary troops, sending them into chaos. Roman auxiliaries scream and scatter, shields fly, spears fall, men crash into one another, trying to escape the onslaught. Caepio's officers beg him to pull back. "We cannot hold a line. The cavalry is lost. The flanks are broken." But Caepio refuses. "We stand, we fight. Victory is mine." His arrogance seals the fate of thousands. Maximus finally moves from the southern camp. Maximus has no choice. He cannot abandon his fellow Romans, even those commanded by a man who despises him. He orders his own legions forward. Standards rise. Horn blasts echo. Lines form with precision. But the distance is great, too great. Maximus's soldiers begin the march, but the dust cloud ahead tells him the truth. By the time he reaches the battlefield, Caepio's army may already be dead. The Roman collapse begins. Back at the front, Caepio's line is nearing its breaking point. The Roman center folds back like a damaged shield. Men fall. Officers die trying to hold their units together. The dust grows thicker. The screams louder. The blood pools in the trampled earth. And then the inevitable happens. A Cimbri spear breaks through the front rank and strikes a signifer, the bearer of a legion's standard. The tall pole falls forward into the dirt. To Romans, the fall of a standard is catastrophic. It is not just defeat, it is dishonor. The line shudders, and then under the weight of the Cimbri charge, it breaks. Like a snapped shield strap, the front ranks fall apart. Men stumble backward into one another. Formation dissolves into chaos. Panic spreads like fire in dry grass. The Roman army begins to collapse. Caepio's realization. Caepio sees the line shatter, sees his men fleeing, sees the Teutones flooding through the gaps, sees the Cimbri sweeping forward with unstoppable momentum. And for the first time in his life, he feels fear, real, unfiltered fear. He rallies a few cavalrymen shouting commands drowned by the roar of battle. His horse rears. Dust swirls around him. He tries to signal a retreat, but the lines are already gone. The army is no longer an army. It is a mob fleeing for their lives. The storm fully breaks. The Cimbri surge forward, unstoppable, relentless. Their war cries shake the sky. The Roman veterans fight desperately, forming small pockets of resistance, but they are swallowed by the sheer magnitude of the charge. This is not a battle anymore. It is a rout, a massacre, and it is only the beginning. Far to the south, Maximus sees the dust rising in violent spirals and understands the storm has broken, and Rome is drowning. Caepio's fatal charge. The battlefield is already unraveling. Dust rises in thick, choking clouds. The screams of dying men echo across the plain. The Rhone glitters like a blade behind the Roman lines, a silent witness to the catastrophe now unfolding. Caepio's army is collapsing, centuries falling out of formation, cavalry scattering standards, disappearing beneath waves of Cimbri spears. Yet in the middle of this chaos, there is a moment, brief, terrible, defining, when the fate of Rome turns on a single decision, a decision born not of strategy, but of ego. Caepio tries to salvage his glory. Quintus Servilius. Caepio sits atop his horse near the rear of his breaking line, his cloak whipping behind him, his eyes wide with fury and disbelief. Dust streaks his armor, sweat drips into his eyes. He had believed this battle was his. He had believed the Cimbri would break before Roman steel. He had believed Maximus would be exposed as a coward when Scipio's army triumphed alone. But now, watching his legions fold like snapped reeds beneath the Cimbri assault, Caepio realizes something horrifying. He has unleashed a disaster on a scale he cannot control. Around him, his officers shout contradictory orders. Some urge retreat. Some beg for reinforcements. Some try to restrain Caepio's horse, desperate to drag him out of the collapsing front. But Caepio is not thinking clearly. Pride blinds him. Desperation drives him. He raises his sword, shouting, "Cavalry with me." We drive into their flank now. The officers stare at him in horror. "General, no, our flank is gone. The infantry is shattered. You will doom the entire force." But Caepio hears none of it. He sees only one path to redemption, a glorious charge that will somehow turn the tide, even though the tide has already consumed half his army. And so he gives the order that will define Arausio for centuries. Charge. The fatal charge begins. The remaining Roman cavalry, what little is left, forms behind Caepio. Their horses snort, nervously, hooves pawing the earth. The ground trembles beneath the weight of the Cimbri push. Caepio lifts his sword, high sunlight, catching on the blade. For a moment he looks like a hero of old, bold, unyielding, defiant. But this is not heroism. This is a man fighting his own humiliation. His horse surges forward. The cavalry follow, forming a desperate wedge aimed at the thickest point of the Cimbri shield wall. The distance closes fast. Cimbri warriors turn in unison, their shields rising, spears angling outward like the spines of a giant beast preparing to strike. Caepio's officers scream warnings. Some attempt to fall back, others charge out of loyalty or fear. The gap narrows 100 meters, 80 meters, 50 meters, 30. Slow motion disaster unfolding. In that final instant before the collision time seems to stretch, imagine standing at Caepio's side. You feel the horse beneath you tremble with adrenaline. You taste dust in the air. You hear the thunder of hooves behind you, the cries of terrified riders. And ahead, the Cimbri shield wall becomes a living mountain of iron and fury. Then everything breaks. The collision. The Roman cavalry crashes into the Cimbri line with a force that should have shattered their defenses. But the Cimbri do not give way. Their shields absorb the blow. Their spears strike upward in deadly arcs. Horses rear. Men scream. The wedge collapses as if striking stone. Caepio's front riders are impaled instantly. Horses topple, throwing riders into the teeth of the shield wall. Cimbri warriors hew down the fallen with axes and long blades. The cavalry behind piles into the mass, creating a mangled knot of metal flesh and shattered wood. Caepio's charge has not broken the line. It has fed it. Caepio in the heart of the fury. Caepio's horse is struck by a spear. The beast collapses with a shriek, throwing him violently to the ground. His helmet cracks against a rock. His vision blurs. Dust, blood, screams. A Cimbri warrior towers over him, spear raised, but another Roman cavalryman crashes into the warrior, giving Caepio a single heartbeat to scramble free. He stumbles through the carnage disoriented, clutching his sword. His leg throbs. His ribs ache. He is no longer a commander on horseback. He is a man running for his life. Around him the cavalry routs, utterly shattered. The Cimbri push deep into the Roman lines. With the cavalry destroyed, the Cimbri surge through the gap, pouring into the rear of Caepio's infantry. Roman legionaries who had held their formation now find themselves enveloped. They fight bravely, shields up, swords, stabbing forward officers, shouting to regroup, but they are overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the Cimbri assault. Axes break their shields, spears pierce their armor. Javelins rain down from behind the shield wall. Teutonic cavalry loops behind them, sealing the retreat. The Roman line collapses entirely. It is no longer a battle. It is a slaughter. Caepio flees. Surrounded by death, Caepio makes his final personal failure of the day. He abandons his men. He flees the battlefield with a handful of surviving horsemen, racing south toward Maximus's position. His cloak is torn, his armor blood-smeared, his face is white with shock. He left his army to die. He left Rome to burn. And as he disappears from the battlefield, one Cimbri warrior shouts after him, "Run, little Roman, the earth drinks your fear." Maximus witnesses the collapse from the southern approach. Maximus and his marching legions see the dust clouds rise, the formations break, the cavalry scatter. They hear the horns of the Cimbri echoing across the plain, announcing total victory on the northern front. An officer beside Maximus whispers, "General, Caepio has doomed us." Maximus does not respond. He stares at the battlefield, at the slaughter, at the rivers of dust and blood where the northern Roman army once stood. Then he gives the only order he can: form battle lines. We hold as long as the gods allow. But he knows the truth. The battle has already been lost, because Caepio's fatal charge, reckless, prideful, doomed from the start, has shattered any chance Rome had of surviving the day. The disaster is no longer coming. The disaster is here. Collapse of the legions. The dust of Caepio's defeat hangs in the air like smoke drifting southward toward Maximus's advancing legions. It clings to armor, stings the eyes, and carries with it the terrible scent of death. The cries of Caepio's shattered army echo across the plain shouts, screams the thunder of fleeing men, the triumphant roar of the Cimbri as they sweep through the broken northern line. Maximus stops on a low rise, watching the disaster unfold in real time. His officers halt beside him, horrified. Below Caepio's army, what remains of it is scattering like frightened birds running in every direction. The northern Roman camp, still full of wounded soldiers, camp followers, supply wagons, is already being overrun. The Battle of Arausio is no longer a battle. It is a collapse, a complete catastrophic collapse. And Maximus now stands directly in the path of the storm. Maximus rallies his army. The southern legions form rapidly, shields overlapping pila, lifted standards, swaying in the cold wind. Maximus rides down the front ranks, shouting commands, urging calm, drawing discipline out of men who can see terror approaching on the horizon. Steady your shields. Hold the line. You fight for Rome. Stand as Romans. His soldiers look at him with desperate eyes. They trust him. But trust cannot change the truth. They are outnumbered and now isolated. The Cimbri are coming. Teutones' cavalry already circle the edges of the field, and the Rhone River glitters behind the Roman lines like a trap. Maximus's officers know this. One leans toward him, voice cracking. "General, should we fall back to the river?" Maximus shakes his head. "If we move now, they will strike us in flight. We stand, we hold." But even he knows they are standing on a grave. The Cimbri redirect their fury. Across the battlefield, the Cimbri leaders watch Caepio's annihilation with calm satisfaction. Clouds of dust rise where Roman formations once stood. Shields lie broken. Corpses cover the ground. Horses gallop riderless. It is everything they expected from Roman arrogance and more. Now they turn toward Maximus, whose legions form a solid block of iron in the southern plain. Boiorix raises his spear and shouts an order. A new roar erupts from the Cimbri. The wagon city shifts. Columns wheel toward the south. Teutones' cavalry rotate to flank. Infantry tighten their shields. Javelin throwers fan out to the edges of their formation. This time, the storm comes with full strength. The Roman front holds. For a moment, the first wave crashes against Maximus's legions like a tidal surge. But unlike Caepio's line, these soldiers are ready. The Roman pila arc through the air in a deadly volley, spears plunging into Cimbri shields, throats, chests. Warriors fall. The momentum halts for a heartbeat. Then the Cimbri hit the line. The impact is enormous, like two walls colliding. Shields slam. Men grunt. The ground itself shudders. But Maximus's line holds. The discipline of the legion shows its worth. Ranks rotate, shields, shift swords, thrust between shield rims, every man fighting as part of a single organism. For 10 minutes, 15, perhaps 20, the Romans hold. Maximus rides behind them shouting encouragement. "Hold, Romans, push, push forward." But there is a problem. A terrible, fatal problem. They are holding only because the full fury of the Cimbri has not yet arrived. The Teutones flank attack. A horn sounds from the western hills. The Roman line quivers. The Teutones' cavalry, huge warriors on massive horses, burst from the dust cloud and slam into the Roman left flank. The auxilia collapse instantly. Shields fly. Men scatter. The Teutones carve into the side of the legionary formation with terrifying efficiency. Maximus sees the collapse and wheels his horse toward the danger. Cavalry reinforce the left. But the Roman cavalry is already failing, outnumbered, overwhelmed, driven backward in a panic. The left flank buckles, the line warps, and into that gap the Cimbri surge. A whirlwind of chaos. Suddenly the battle changes shape. Where there was once an orderly line, there is now a twisting, screaming mass of desperate combat. The Cimbri hammer through the breach, turning the Roman flank. Maximus's soldiers try to pivot, trying to form a defensive circle, but the suddenness of the assault is too great. Teutonic horsemen ride down the fleeing auxiliaries' spears, thrusting axes, swinging. Cimbri foot warriors crash into the newly exposed Roman rear, hacking their way forward with merciless precision. Maximus's centurions fight like lions. Some form mini phalanxes. Others establish last-stand pockets. But everywhere the Cimbri are flooding in. The formation is gone. The discipline is gone. The army is broken. Panic sweeps the field. A Roman legionary breaks and runs. Then another. Then 10. Then 100. Panic spreads like wildfire. The dust thickens. The lines dissolve. The scream of the wounded becomes a constant, terrible chorus. Maximus tries to rally the men riding into the thickest of the melee, shouting, "Stand, stand, reform the line." But no one can hear him, or if they hear, they do not obey. Because the Cimbri are everywhere now, pouring into the center, encircling the right, slamming the left, driving the Romans backward toward the river. The Rhone becomes a death trap. The soldiers falling back do not realize the danger until it is too late. The river is behind them, cold, deep, swift. Men stumble into the water, dragged down by armor. Others leap in blindly, desperate to escape the slaughter. Some try to swim, only to be dragged under by panicked comrades. The river becomes choked with bodies, shields, splintered wagons. The Rhone drinks Rome's blood. Maximus faces his final choice, Gaius Marius. Maximus sees the collapse, the retreat. The drowning men, the encirclement tightening like a noose. An officer rides up, blood on his face, shouting, "General, we must withdraw." Maximus looks at the battlefield, his men dying, their lines shattered, the enemy victorious on every front. He knows the truth. A retreat is no longer a maneuver. It is merely death delayed. But he will not abandon his army as Caepio did. So he makes the only choice a Roman commander of honor can make. He stays. He fights to the last. He disappears into the crush of warriors, sword flashing, standard falling beside him. Some say he died on the field. Others claim he drowned in the Rhone, trying to save his soldiers. Ancient sources disagree, but the truth matters little. Maximus fell with his men. The final collapse. By midday, the Roman army no longer exists. Tens of thousands lie dead. Thousands more drown. The rest scatter across the countryside, leaderless and terrified. The Cimbri stand victorious. Amid the carnage, their shields bloodied their warriors, exhausted their wagon city, watching from afar. The Battle of Arausio is not just a defeat. It is a catastrophe, a massacre. One of the worst losses Rome has ever known, and its consequences will reshape the Republic. The harvest of the dead. The sun hangs low over the plains of Arausio, its light muted by drifting smoke, and the haze of dust still lingering from the battle. What had begun at dawn as a field of golden grasses and cold river mist is now a vast broken graveyard stretching to the horizon. The Rhone runs thick with bodies. The air reeks of iron and death. The Cimbri stand amid the ruins of two Roman armies, victorious, stunned, and grimly aware of the carnage around them. For all their fury in battle, they are not blind to the cost of war. Their warriors move slowly through the wreckage, stepping over bodies, examining broken shields, retrieving their own fallen, tending to the wounded. This is not triumph in the Roman sense. This is survival. This is the harvest of the dead. A field without end. Imagine standing on the battlefield now. The dust has settled, the screams have faded, but silence has not returned, only an eerie, heavy stillness. Everywhere you look, the plain is covered with the remnants of a shattered army. Piles of Roman shields broken like clay pots. Swords snapped in half, standard poles lying in the mud, their eagles torn away. The bodies of legionaries sprawled in contorted positions. Horses strewn across the field, legs tangled, eyes staring blankly. Axes embedded in shields or buried in the earth. A Roman historian would later write, "The Rhone carried more Romans than land could bury." It is no exaggeration. The river is choked with corpses, men weighed down by armor, men who leapt in panic, men dragged under by the desperate hands of drowning comrades. The current tugs at tunics and cloaks, carrying bodies downstream in a slow, macabre procession. To the Cimbri, this is not victory to celebrate. It is the grim reality of confronting a superpower in its own territory. The Cimbri move through the aftermath. Boiorix, Lugius Caesorix, and Teutones ride slowly across the field, surveying the wreckage. Their wolfskin cloaks flutter in the cold wind. Their faces are not triumphant. They are solemn. They had not sought annihilation, but Rome forced it. And now the Cimbri must assess the consequences. Warriors from both nations move across the field, marking the positions of their fallen. Some kneel beside friends or brothers, pressing foreheads to the ground. Others stand in silence, gripping spears so tightly their knuckles whiten. Cimbri women descend from the wagon city, moving among the wounded with water and cloth. They lift their voices in chant songs of mourning of passage of the ancient spirits guiding the dead home. The Romans too are tended, but only if they still breathe. Those who surrendered are gathered. Those too wounded to move are helped. Those still capable of walking are marched under guard. But there are not many survivors. The Cimbri look across the field and realize what they have done. They have destroyed the entire Roman force. The horror in the Roman camps. As the Cimbri sweep south, they come to the Roman camps, 10,000 tents meticulously arranged, now abandoned. Fires still burn in pits. Tools lie scattered. Bread sits half-baked where soldiers fled mid-meal, and then they find the wounded, hundreds of them crawling through the mud, begging for help, for mercy, for water. The Cimbri do not understand Latin, but they understand suffering. Those who pose no threat are given water and bound with makeshift tourniquets. Others, in too much agony to survive, are granted a quick death. The Cimbri are no savages. They are warriors with a code. But the sight of so many wounded Roman men, abandoned by their own commanders, creates a deep impression among them. Maximus fought to the last. Caepio fled. Rome left its own men behind. To the Cimbri, this confirms everything their elders had said about Roman arrogance, Rome's greatest loss. Since Cannae, ancient writers struggled to count the dead. Some say 80,000 Roman soldiers fell. Others claim over 100,000, including camp followers and auxiliaries. Still others insist the total losses reached 120,000, 150,000 lives. No matter the exact number, the truth is clear. Arausio is one of the worst military disasters in Roman history. Worse than Cannae, worse than Carrhae, worse than any defeat Rome had suffered in centuries. 2 Roman armies have been erased in a single morning, entire legions wiped from existence. Generations of Roman families left without sons, the Republic left without a northern defense, and the psychological impact is immediate and devastating. The survivors' tales. A handful of Roman soldiers managed to flee south, some on horseback, others on foot, stumbling through forests and across fields half mad with fear and grief. They carry stories of disaster that seem impossible. The Cimbri were giants. They fought like demons. The river swallowed whole units. Our leaders abandoned us. We never stood a chance. By the time they reached settlements in southern Gaul, their cries spread like wildfire. Rome is destroyed. The barbarians are coming. There is nothing left. Panic spreads through towns. Merchants flee. Families pack their belongings. Farmers abandon their fields. Word speeds toward Italy, reaching the Senate in a flood of contradictory, terrifying messages. Rome does not know the details yet, but it knows something unthinkable has happened. The Cimbri's restraint. What happens next is perhaps the greatest irony of Arausio. The Cimbri do not invade Italy. They have every opportunity. No Roman army stands in their way. The Alps lie open. The Republic is terrified. But the Cimbri are not conquerors. They are migrants. And so, instead of marching south to crush Rome, they turn west toward the Pyrenees and Spain. For a time, Rome breathes easier. But the Cimbri's choice is not mercy. It is simply their way. They seek land, not empire. Survival, not glory. Yet Rome does not understand this. To the Senate, the Cimbri's withdrawal is temporary, a calm, before an even greater storm. Rome's grief. Back in the capital, the news finally arrives. The Senate hall falls silent. Veteran senators weep openly, mothers cry out in the forum, temples fill with offerings to avert further disaster. Politicians scramble to assign blame. Some point at Maximus, others at Caepio, still others at the Senate itself. And in the streets, fear becomes anger. Roman citizens demand a leader, someone who can stop the Cimbri, someone who can rebuild the shattered legions, someone who can transform failure into revenge. A name begins to rise in the whispers of the crowd's Gaius Marius. The harvest is collected. Before the Cimbri move on, they perform their final ritual. They gather their dead with reverence. They place them on funeral pyres high as wagons. Priests chant deeply. Women wail mourning songs that echo across the plains. Warriors stand silently, shields raised, and the Roman dead. Their bodies remain scattered across the field, a warning to the world. Rome is not invincible. The Cimbri march on, leaving Arausio behind. The wind sweeps across the empty plain. The river carries the last of the fallen downstream, and the greatest defeat in Roman military history settles like a shadow over the Republic. The rise of Marius. The news of Arausio reaches Rome like a plague wind. Messengers gallop day and night down the roads of Gaul and across the Italian countryside, their faces pale, their words stumbling. The rumors spread first, whispers in taverns, gasps in markets, frightened murmurs in temples. Then the messengers themselves arrive exhausted, trembling, barely able to speak. When the truth finally reaches the Senate, it is worse than any rumor. 2 Roman armies gone, 2 commanders destroyed or disgraced, tens of thousands dead. The northern frontier open, the Republic defenseless. Rome, for the first time in generations, tastes terror. The Republic trembles. In the Forum, crowds gather in swelling waves of panic. Senators emerge from the Curia with drawn faces. Mothers cry out for sons who will never return. Veterans shake their heads, muttering of the gods' anger or Rome's growing corruption. The chronicles will later write, "Never since Cannae had Rome trembled so deeply." And yet, unlike Cannae, where Hannibal marched relentlessly upon the weakened Republic, the Cimbri do not come south. They wander west instead toward Spain, seeking land, not conquest. But Rome does not understand their behavior. Rome fears the worst. Rome believes the Cimbri retreat is temporary. They will be back, people whisper. They will come for us. Fear turns into desperation. Desperation turns into resolve. And resolve seeks one man. The Senate debates, the people demand. The Senate chamber becomes a furnace of blame. Some accuse Caepio of treason. Others blame Maximus for weakness. Still others blame themselves for ever allowing 2 rival generals to share command. But one truth dominates all debate. Rome needs a savior. A general capable of rebuilding the legions, reforming the army, restoring Roman honor, and defeating the Cimbri when they inevitably return. One voice rises above the rest, then another and another, until the gallery of the Curia is filled with shouts. Call Marius Gaius Marius, hero of Numidia, defeater of Jugurtha, the most capable general of his generation. A novus homo, yes, a new man like Maximus, but one whose brilliance in war cannot be denied. The Senate hesitates. Marius is already consul. He is already serving abroad. To call him again would break tradition, defy precedent, and give immense power to a single man. But Rome no longer cares for precedent. Rome cares for survival. And so, under the pressure of the people and the fear of annihilation, the Senate sends for Marius. He accepts without hesitation. Marius returns to a broken republic. When Marius arrives in Rome, the crowd surge to meet him. They call him the savior of Rome, the last hope, the new Scipio. But Marius does not bask in their adoration. He sees only fear in their eyes. And on the steps of the Senate he speaks clearly, "You do not need a hero. You need an army worthy of Rome." Those words spoken with cold resolve change the course of Roman history. Marius knows the truth. The legions are depleted. Recruitment is broken. Discipline shattered. Morale non-existent. Manpower devastated by Arausio. If Rome is to survive the next Cimbri invasion, it must rebuild its entire military system from the ground up. He sets to work immediately. The Marian reforms begin. What we now call the Marian reforms did not emerge as a planned political agenda. They were born of desperation, necessity, and Marius's iron resolve. Recruitment of the capita censi, the landless poor. Before Marius, only landowning citizens could serve in the legions, but the landowners had already given their sons to Arausio and lost them. Rome had no soldiers left, so Marius broke tradition. He opened recruitment to the capitae censi, the poorest citizens' men with no property, no influence, and no prospects. For the first time in Roman history, the poor became Rome's soldiers. The Senate balked. Traditionalists protested. Aristocrats warned it would destabilize society. But Marius did not yield. He answered simply, "Rome needs men. I will find them wherever they can be found." And the poor, hungry for opportunity, flocked to his banners, standardized training and equipment. Marius did what no general before him had dared. He standardized everything. Every legionary would carry the same javelin, the same sword, the same equipment. Every soldier would train in the same drills. Every cohort would move as a unified machine. He gave Rome an army not of conscripted farmers, but of professionals. He made soldiers into a career, not a civic duty. And the results were immediate. The cohort system, Rome's old manipular formation, brilliant in earlier centuries, had begun to falter against massive tribal armies. Marius replaced it with cohorts, larger, more flexible, more resilient. Cohorts could absorb charges better. Cohorts could maneuver more easily. Cohorts could not be shattered as easily as the smaller maniples. The Cimbri would never again break a Roman line so easily. Soldiers' loyalty shifts forever. By recruiting the poor and promising land after service, Marius created a new dynamic in Roman politics. Before, Marius soldiers fought for the Republic. After, Marius soldiers fought for their general. This change will one day lead to Julius Caesar, to civil wars, to the fall of the Republic itself. But no one sees that yet. For now, Rome sees only a savior. The Cimbri return from Spain. While Marius rebuilds Rome's legions, the Cimbri and Teutones wander west into Hispania. But the land there is harsh, the tribes hostile, and the climate strange to northerners. Within a year the Cimbri turn back toward Gaul. Rome receives the news with dread. They are coming again. The north will fall. Prepare the walls. But this time Rome is ready. Marius marches north with his new army, professional, disciplined, hardened by relentless training. The Senate grants him multiple consecutive consulships, an unprecedented honor, a sign of absolute trust. And when he looks upon his legions, he sees not the trembling conscripts of Arausio, but an army forged to withstand the fury of tribal migrations. The shadow of Arausio guides him. Every decision Marius makes is shaped by the memory of Arausio. Never divide command. Never underestimate the enemy. Never allow ego to guide strategy. Never let Roman pride lead to Roman slaughter. Marius has learned what Caepio and Maximus did not. That unity is not a privilege, but survival. And so, as he marches north, he carries the weight of Arausio with him, not as a shame, but as a lesson written in blood. The Republic transformed. By the end of the year, Rome is no longer the same republic that marched toward Arausio. It is stronger, more disciplined, more professional, more politically unstable, more militarized. The armies now belong not to the Senate, but to whichever general commands their loyalty. And this transformation, all of it begins with the catastrophe of Arausio. The final preparation. As Marius reaches northern Gaul, his scouts report the news he's been expecting. The Cimbri and Teutones are moving south. A second confrontation is coming. This time, Rome will not face them divided. This time, Rome will not underestimate them. This time, Rome will not break. And when the Roman soldiers look to their commander, they see a man forged by necessity, hardened by war, and driven by a single purpose to ensure that Arausio never happens again. The echo of Arausio. The plains of Arausio lie quiet now. Seasons have passed. Grass grows again where bodies once lay. The Rhone runs clear, no longer choked with shields and corpses. Birds drift over the valley, unaware that the soil beneath them once drank the blood of tens of thousands. But to Rome, the wound remains open. Arausio is not simply a battlefield. It is a lesson, a warning, a shadow stretching across the Republic's future. The disaster shaped the destiny of Rome, reshaped its armies, shifted political power, and set the stage for the rise and fall of the Roman Republic itself. Its echo will roll across centuries. The memory of catastrophe. Rome did not bury the dead of Arausio. The Cimbri moved on, and the battlefield remained a mass grave. Travelers, in the years that followed, spoke of bones whitening under the sun of rusted weapons, half buried in the soil of ghosts, whispered about by shepherds. The Senate declared days of mourning. Temples were filled with offerings. Mothers wandered the forum in black cloaks, searching for names that would never be found. Entire neighborhoods lost all their men. For some families, Arausio meant extinction. No sons, no fathers, no brothers left alive. Ancient historians would write with grim understatement, Rome was left without an army. But the truth ran deeper. Rome was left without certainty. For the first time in centuries, the Republic doubted its own power. Political reverberations. Arausio detonated the old political order. The aristocratic elites men like Caepio, whose pride had fueled the disaster, found themselves under furious attack. The Roman people blamed them for the arrogance, incompetence, and corruption that had allowed such a catastrophe. Caepio himself became a symbol of everything failing within the Republic. His flight from battle, his refusal to cooperate with Maximus, his obsession with personal glory, his contempt for those of lower birth. The Senate passed a law confiscating his property. He was exiled. He died in disgrace. But the damage wrought by his pride outlived him. Arausio convinced the Roman people that nobility did not guarantee competence, that birth did not guarantee leadership, that Rome needed generals of ability, not lineage. Thus the path opened for men like Gaius Marius, and later more dangerously for men like Julius Caesar. The military revolution of Marius Arausio's legacy is written most clearly in the army Marius built. The Marian reforms transformed Roman warfare from a part-time obligation of citizen soldiers to a profession, a disciplined engine of conquest. After Marius, the armies became permanent. The soldiers became career professionals. Equipment became standardized. Training became rigorous and uniform. Loyalty shifted from Senate to general. This transformation gave Rome unparalleled military strength. It also planted the seeds for future civil wars. Marius's legions would later fight Sulla's. Caesar's would fight Pompey's. The Republic would collapse under the weight of its own armies. But none of this was visible in the years after Arausio. All Rome saw then was salvation, the defeat that enabled victory. Arausio's tragedy directly enabled Rome's later triumphs over the Cimbri and Teutones. When the Cimbri finally returned years later, marching south in hope of settlement, they did not face Caepio's arrogance or divided legions. They faced Marius. And Marius crushed them, first the Teutones at Aquae Sextiae, then the Cimbri at Vercellae. Those victories cemented Marius as Rome's greatest general and secured Rome's northern frontier for generations. But the deeper truth is this: without Arausio, Marius would never have risen. Without Arausio, the Marian reforms would not exist. Without Arausio, Rome's later conquests might never have occurred. Catastrophe shaped the conqueror. The long shadow of division Arausio also taught Rome a painful strategic lesson. A divided command is a doomed command. Future Roman generals cited Arausio whenever political rivals threatened battlefield unity. The cautionary tale echoed through every Senate debate, every military council, every battlefield of the late Republic. But the Republic was already changing. Ambition, ego, and political rivalry would continue to tear Rome apart, eventually leading to the Sullan proscriptions, the Catiline conspiracy, Caesar crossing the Rubicon, the final civil wars, and the birth of the Roman Empire. In this sense, Arausio was not the cause of Rome's downfall, but a precursor, a thunderclap before the greater storm. A lesson for the ages. In military academies centuries later, the Battle of Arausio would be studied not for its tactics, but for its failures. Failure of unity, failure of leadership, failure of communication, failure of humility. Commanders learned more from its disaster than from many Roman victories. Arausio became a testament to the truth. Every soldier understands. An army divided is already defeated. The Cimbri's legacy. For the Cimbri and Teutones, Arausio was both triumph and tragedy. They shattered Rome. They humbled a superpower. They proved their strength beyond all doubt. But they remained wanderers, seeking land, not empire. Rome could survive disaster. The Cimbri could not survive displacement. Within a few years, Marius would destroy them utterly. Their victory at Arausio became their epitaph. The plain stand today on the fields near modern Orange, France, where Arausio once unfolded, and the land seems peaceful. Vineyards stretch across the slopes, farmhouses dot the terrain, and the river flows quietly. But if you listen closely, you might sense something beneath the soil. The echo of shields clashing, the roar of charging warriors, the final cries of drowning men, the whisper of a broken republic. History sleeps lightly here. The final reflection. Arausio stands as one of Rome's darkest days, a defeat so immense that the republic nearly collapsed. Yet it also stands as a moment of transformation. From defeat came reform. From reform came power. From power came empire. This paradox defines the Roman story. The Battle of Arausio was not the end of Rome. It was the crucible that forged the Rome yet to come. The legions that would conquer half the known world, the legions that would build roads, cities, aqueducts, and empires, were born from the ashes of this single catastrophic morning. And so as the sun sets once more over the quiet plains of Arausio, its light falls on a truth that history never forgets. Sometimes a nation is shaped not by its triumphs, but by its greatest disaster.